I am 73 years old, and the last time I asked my son for help, he said he would call me back. That was on a Tuesday. By Friday, I had fixed the pipe myself, standing on a step stool in my kitchen, wearing the same cardigan I had worn to my husband Reginald's funeral 11 years ago, because it was cold, and because I had stopped caring which clothes I wore in which rooms. The water had pooled around the base of the cabinet. It had soaked through the particle board. The smell was that particular damp smell, the one that lives in the walls of old houses and never fully leaves. I had paper towels pressed against the floor and a flashlight held between my teeth, and my knees were the knees of a woman who should not be crouching like that. But I fixed it, and my son never called back.
Now, before I tell you what I am going to tell you, I want you to understand something. I am not here to perform sadness for you. I am not going to cry. I cried plenty in the first 3 years after Reginald passed, in the dark of our bedroom with the door closed and the television on, so the neighbors could not hear. And I think I used up a significant portion of what was available to me. What I have left is clarity, and clarity, I have learned, is more useful than grief. What I am going to tell you will sound unkind. It will sound like something a cold woman says. People have called me cold before, and I have let them, because the alternative, the warm version of me that waited by the telephone and rearranged her whole week around the possibility of a visit, that version almost did not survive. Everyone will tell you to lean on your family. Every card in every pharmacy aisle says it. Every well-meaning neighbor who brings a casserole says it. The whole architecture of what we are told about growing old is built on this one assumption, that the people who love you will show up. What no one tells you is that leaning, real leaning, the kind where you actually shift your weight, causes the people you lean on to slowly, quietly step back. Not because they are cruel, not because they do not love you, but because leaning is heavy, and most people were not built to hold it indefinitely, and no one tells them that either. The cruel system I use is not cruel at all. It only sounds cruel when I describe it out loud, and I am going to describe it to you now, exactly as I live it, because I think you are sitting somewhere recognizing something in what I am saying, and I think you deserve the full truth instead of the comfortable version. Here is the comfortable version. Stay close to your family. Ask for help when you need it. Let people love you. Here is the truth. The moment you become a problem to be managed, you stop being a person to be visited. I learned this not from a book. I learned this from a woman named Cordelia. Cordelia lived 4 houses down from me for 19 years. We were not close friends, the way people describe closeness in movies. We were the kind of friends who knew which days to ring the doorbell and which days to leave a note in the mailbox instead. We understood each other through the shorthand of proximity and shared season. She had 2 daughters. Both lived within 30 minutes of her house. Both had her photograph on their refrigerators, the kind hung by a magnet from some vacation she had taken with them years ago. When Cordelia's hip went, her daughters came. At first, constantly. The cars were always in the driveway. I would see the lights on late. I thought, how wonderful. What a woman to have raised daughters like that. Then I noticed the pattern. By the 3rd month, the visits were shorter. By the 5th, they were scheduled. By the 8th, Cordelia had a calendar on her wall, and she told me about it over tea one afternoon. Not with pride, but with the particular flatness of someone describing weather. Tuesday, one daughter came and did the groceries. Thursday, the other daughter came and helped with the medical forms. Saturday, sometimes both, if nothing else came up. She had become an appointment. She told me she never said no to anything they suggested anymore. Not because she agreed, but because she had learned that disagreement cost her a visit. She had stopped mentioning when she was cold at night because the solution they offered was a thermostat adjustment she did not want. She had stopped telling them when she felt afraid because it led to conversations about options that frightened her more than the original fear. She was present in her own house, in her own life, and completely powerless. The last time I visited Cordelia, she was sitting in a chair that was not her chair. Her daughters had bought it because it was easier to get out of. It faced a wall that she did not choose to face. The curtains were a color she would not have picked. The whole room was arranged for efficiency, not for her. Her hands were folded in her lap, and she was watching nothing. Cordelia was not unhappy because her daughters did not love her. She was unhappy because she had slowly traded every preference, every opinion, every small act of self-determination in exchange for their continued presence. And they gave her their continued presence, scheduled, managed, efficient. I drove home from that visit and I sat in my driveway for a long time. My car was 14 years old and had a crack in the dashboard from a summer it spent parked in full sun. I had been meaning to do something about that crack for years. I looked at it and I thought, I am not going to become an appointment. This is where the system begins. It does not begin with a dramatic decision. It begins with a list. I went inside and I found a notebook, the kind with the marbled cover, the kind you find at the bottom of a drawer because you bought it with intention and never used it. I sat at my kitchen table and I wrote down every single thing in my life that I currently depended on another person to do. Not the things I preferred to share, the things I required. The difference matters. I needed someone to drive me to my medical appointments because I had let my confidence on the highway erode over years of not driving on highways. I needed someone to help me carry things from the car when I bought too much at once. I needed someone to explain certain documents to me because I had let myself believe I was not capable of understanding them. That last one stopped me. I sat with it for a moment. I had a college education. I had run the finances of a household for decades. I had negotiated with contractors and argued with insurance companies and raised 3 children who could all read above grade level. And I had, without noticing, convinced myself that certain documents were beyond me because it was easier to hand them to someone, because handing them over felt like closeness, because asking for help felt like connection. What it actually was, I understood sitting at that table, was practice. I had been practicing dependence the way you practice a language, a little every day, until it became fluent. The system is this. Every dependency I could reverse, I reversed. Not all at once, one at a time, with the patience of someone who understands that urgency is the enemy of permanence. I started driving on the highway on Tuesday mornings when the traffic was light. I did not enjoy it for the first 6 weeks. My hands were tight on the wheel, and I took exits I did not need just to feel the relief of leaving the fast road. But I stayed with it, and somewhere around the 8th week, I drove 40 miles without thinking about it. I took a class at the library on reading financial documents. I was the oldest person there by 20 years, and I brought a thermos of tea, and I took notes in the marbled notebook, and I did not apologize for asking the instructor to repeat things. I hired a grocery delivery service, not because I could not shop, but because carrying heavy bags had been the single most consistent reason I called my son. I removed the reason. The calls I make to my son now are not about bags. They are about nothing important, about a bird I saw, or a show I watched, or a question I had about something he mentioned once. I call with nothing because I have enough of everything. And because I have enough of everything, he answers. That last part is important. I need you to hear it. He answers, not always immediately. He is a person with a life, and I respect that. but he answers, and when he does, we talk. And when we talk, it is because we want to, not because he is managing a problem. I am not the pipe under the sink. I am his mother. And he gets to experience me as his mother because I have refused to become his responsibility. There is a name for what I was doing before. The therapist I saw briefly after Reginald died called it anxious attachment. I call it an understandable mistake. When the person you built your life around is gone, you look around at what remains and you start holding tighter to everything else. Tighter and tighter, the way a person holds a railing on a ship in rough water. Except the railing was my children, and nobody is a railing. Not even the most loving, most devoted child in the world can be held like that without eventually needing to put distance between themselves and the grip. I released the grip. It was not graceful. There was a week in the middle of it where I sat in this kitchen and I was so aware of my own solitude that it felt like a physical presence, like a large piece of furniture that had been moved into the room without my permission. The silence was very loud. The refrigerator hums in a particular frequency, and I heard it constantly. I thought about calling someone, anyone, just to put noise into the air. I made tea instead, and then I made a second cup, and I sat with it. The loneliness did not leave, but I stopped fighting it, and when I stopped fighting it, it arranged itself differently. It became more like solitude, and solitude, I have learned, is loneliness with the panic removed. I want to tell you about something I started after that week. I began every single morning, without exception, to do one thing that was entirely and exclusively for myself. Not for my health, not to be more capable, not to be less of a burden, for myself. I started painting. Not well, extraordinarily not well. I paint on small canvases that I buy in packs of 10 from a craft store, and I do not show them to anyone, and they are not good. And I do not care. I paint because it is mine. I paint because it is an hour in the morning where I am not a mother or a neighbor or a widow or a patient or a responsibility. I am a person with a brush making something. The first painting I made was supposed to be a vase of flowers, and it looked like a small explosion in a garden. I keep it on the shelf above my desk because it makes me laugh. And laughing in the morning is, I have come to believe, a form of vitamin. I also started, and this is the part that will sound coldest, being ruthlessly selective about what I shared and what I kept. When something in my house needs fixing, I determine whether I can learn to fix it, hire someone to fix it, or live without it. I exhaust those 3 options before I call my children. Not because I do not want to hear their voices, but because the moment I call with a problem, I have shifted something in our relationship. I have inserted need. And need, extended over years, calcifies into obligation. And obligation is the burial ground of love. I know a man named Bartholomew who refused to do any of this. He lived the opposite way. His house was always something that needed doing, and there was always a grandchild or a child or a neighbor recruited to do it. He had company constantly in the way that a waiting room has company. People came to perform tasks and then left. He described himself as surrounded by family. What he was surrounded by was an ongoing project that happened to have his name on it. He told me once at a neighborhood gathering that he could not understand why his grandchildren seemed nervous around him. They were not nervous, Bartholomew. They were calculating. Every visit, they were calculating what would be asked of them before they could leave. He passed 2 winters ago. At the service, his grandchildren spoke beautifully. Everything they said was true. He was generous and warm and full of stories. But the specific daily texture of his presence in their lives had been that of someone who needed things. And need, unbroken, is exhausting. And they were exhausted. And that exhaustion lived right alongside their love, quietly, for years. I do not want to be loved exhaustedly. I want to be loved the way you love something you chose. The way you love a walk you decided to take because the afternoon was beautiful, not the errand you ran because the list demanded it. The system at its core is this. I have built a life that does not require rescue. I have made myself capable of the ordinary, and I have made peace with my limits on the extraordinary. I have a doctor I trust, and appointments I keep, and medications I understand. I have a neighbor, a woman named Thessaly, who has a key to my house, and I have a key to hers. And we check on each other the way adults check on each other, with respect and without drama. I have friends I made in the last 5 years, late life friends who know me only as I am now, not as I was, and who have no history with me to make them feel guilty and no debt to me to make them feel trapped. They choose me fresh every time. I have a list in the marbled notebook of the things I cannot do alone and may never be able to. I have plans for those things that do not involve calling my children in a panic. The plans are written down. The numbers are in my phone. When something on that list happens, I will be calm because I have already made the decision in a calm moment. And panic decision-making is the fastest route to losing everything you work to protect. My daughter called me last month to ask if I wanted to come for dinner. Not because I needed feeding, not because something was broken. She called because she wanted to see me. I heard it in her voice, the wanting. It was not obligation. It was not management. It was a daughter who missed her mother and picked up the phone because she felt like it. I went. I sat at her table and ate food I had not cooked and listened to my grandchildren tell me things that mattered to them. And I told them things that mattered to me. And nobody needed anything from anybody. And it was, quietly, one of the best evenings I have had in years. That is what I protected. That is what the system protects, not my pride. Not my independence for its own sake. That evening, the choosing, the wanting. You cannot manufacture that. You cannot beg your way into it. You cannot need your way into it. You arrive at it only by becoming the kind of person whose company is a gift instead of a weight. I am not saying it is easy. I am saying it is possible. And I am saying that the version of you sitting somewhere right now, wondering why the visits are shorter or why the calls feel different, that version of you is not too late. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. The pipe under my sink is holding. I fixed it with my own hands in a cardigan that smells like everything I have lived through. And it is holding. And the floor is dry. And I made myself a cup of tea afterward. And I sat down. And I did not call anyone to tell them about it. I just lived it. If any piece of what I said tonight felt like something you needed to hear, you know what to do. Click subscribe, not because I am asking for company, but because we are already in the middle of a conversation worth continuing. There is more where this came from, and the next one might be the one that changes something. Take care of yourself, whatever that means for you.